Thanks, everybody. Okay, first order of business. I hold in my hand a $25, this is a sleazy trick to get you all to pay attention, by the way, a $25 Starbucks gift card. In my slides, there is one very bad visual pun, and whoever can find it first gets $25 worth of lattes. Now, there's a bunch of dumb jokes, too. You don't get any credit for dumb jokes. You got to find the bad pun. All right. So as Amy said, I'm a big believer in using analytical models and frameworks to inform and to analyze qualitative research findings. I really believe that this is important. I think that it helps bring rigor and discipline and structure to the practice of market research. And if there's anything that needs rigor and discipline and structure, it's qualitative. And so with that in mind, I'm going to show you today one of my new favorite tools. This is it's a tool I've been using for a couple of years. It is, I like it because it consistently yields insights that are unexpected and that are really actionable, really practical. And the other thing about it is that it is highly, highly versatile. You can use it in a whole variety of situations, such as maybe you have a chain of restaurants and you're trying to get your employees to wash their hands. You might be an online retailer and you've got people who have products in their shopping carts and you want them to buy those things. You might be a brick and mortar retailer and you'd like people to stop coming into your store, looking at stuff and then going home and buying it online from somebody else. Or maybe you're just my across the street neighbor Mike and you're trying to paper train a new puppy. Aw, I know. What all those things have in common is that these all represent behavior changes. And I think that that's important because I think that behavior change is one of the most important and common challenges that we face as marketers and as researchers. I certainly do with my clients. They want people to buy something, they want them to buy it sooner, they want them to buy more of it, they want them to buy it in a specific place, they want them to recommend it to a friend, they want them to use it differently. The list goes on. And I bet all of you face behavior change challenges in your professional lives all the time as well. And that is why we should all know about this guy. That is B.J. Fogg. That's the silliest picture of him that I could find. He is, among other things, a behavioral scientist, and he's responsible for the Fogg behavior model. Now, most of his work is in the area of organizational behavior and design, but no worries, this model is easily applicable to marketing challenges. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. The basic idea of the Fogg behavior model is that behavior is a function. It's a function of motivation. Sorry, I've got little visual aids here. Motivation, ability, and triggers. And we're going to go into detail on all those things. In order for a behavior to occur, all three of those elements, motivation, ability, and triggers, must be present. By the way, I am happy to share my slides, so don't get all crazy about taking pictures of it. All three of those elements must be present, and they all must be present at the same time. Now, if we're going to represent behavior as a function, then presumably you can map it. And you often see the Fogg model depicted this way, graphically. And this is a good way of looking at it because, among other things, it makes the point that motivation and ability are inversely related. If motivation is high, you don't really need to worry about ability as much. When people are motivated, you can get them to do all kinds of stuff, really extraordinary things sometimes. And as their motivation level drops, it gets hard to get them to do even the easy stuff. So let's break this all down and start looking at the various elements that make this up. And let's begin with motivation. What's motivation? Motivation is interest. Motivation is commitment. Motivation is why people want to do the things that they do. Often, I find the challenge lies in catching people at times of high motivation because motivation does tend to fluctuate. I'm going to show you how Fogg looks at motivation because his is a very interesting take, but I'm also going to show you some other ways of thinking about motivation as well because we're not bound to how Fogg looks at these various elements. Fogg identifies three core motivators, three psychological factors that drive interest and commitment. Each of them has a positive aspect and a negative aspect. The first one is sensation. The positive aspect is pleasure. The negative aspect is pain. Pleasure and pain drive an awful lot of what we do. They drive an awful lot of consumer behavior. If you look at a lot of fast food advertising and promotion, a lot of it is aimed right at, a lot of it is aimed right at hunger. I work a lot in the OTC space. And I can tell you that a lot of the usage occasions of OTC products, particularly analgesics, is driven by pain, discomfort, things like that. So pleasure and pain play a lot of the role in the things that we do. The next motivator that Fogg identifies is anticipation. The positive aspect is hope, the negative aspect is fear. Hope is the anticipation of something good happening, fear is the anticipation of something bad. Hope and fear responsible for an awful lot of what we do. Why do we join dating services? We hope to meet that special someone. Why do we buy lottery tickets? We want to get rich. Anybody here using a VPN now? I know a lot of people who are. They're scared of getting hacked. There's a hand right there. Home security systems, we're scared of getting robbed. Hope and fear drive a lot of behavior, and one of the things that I find to be interesting is that hope and fear often can overpower pleasure and pain. Anticipation can be a more powerful motivator than sensation. And if you want an example of that, think about colonoscopies. You probably don't want to, but think about them anyway. A colonoscopy is not a whole hell of a lot of fun, but 14 million of them get done in the United States every year, and people endure the discomfort out of the fear that they'll get colon cancer, or maybe the hope that they won't. The third one, you'll notice we're working our way up the emotional ladder here. The third one is belonging. The desire for affiliation is a very powerful one. We all want to belong. Positive aspect is acceptance. The negative aspect is rejection. It drives an awful lot of what we do, from the clothes we wear to the cars we drive to the words we use, OMG. We are tribal animals. We want to be part of the group. I've had, in the course of my career, had many opportunities to talk to people about why and how and whether or not they vote. And it is uncanny the degree to which tribal impulses drive voting behavior, far more than any rational examination of the underlying issues. So that's, Facebook, by the way, is another really good example. Think about all the things that we do on Facebook: posting a picture of what you just had for lunch, an update on your kid's birthday party, trolling for likes. It's all about social acceptance. So that's Fogg's 3 motivators. I personally think that there's a fourth, so here's my little addition, and that is self-esteem. I think that our image of ourselves and how we want to see ourselves is responsible for a lot of our behavior as well. Think about altruism. Think about the money we give to charity. Think about the sacrifices that parents make for their children. A lot of that is driven by our image of ourselves. So that's Fogg's take on motivation. Before I move on to ability, I want to make one point, and that is, that we are not bound only to Fogg's way of looking at motivation. This is kind of a basket of tools, and his tool is a good one. But here are some other ways. Risk and reward is a good way of thinking about it. I'm a qualitative guy. I moderate a lot of focus groups and one-on-one interviews and online bulletin boards and so forth. And one thing that I have learned, here's a tip for you, is that if you want to get people talking about motivation, get them talking in the context of risk and reward. That's something people understand. They're comfortable talking about it. It's a very good way of entering into that conversation. Other ways of looking at motivation, though. Here's an oldie but a goodie, the Hertzberg two-factor theory, sometimes called the theory of hygiene and motivation. And another one, these are both from the 60s, expectancy theory. These are long-standing, well-understood models of motivation. They're not new, but they work. And if for some reason Fogg's take on motivation isn't working for you, there's no reason not to revert to one of these. This is one of my tools, trade-off analysis. I've been using it for the whole time I've been in business. It's a great way of understanding what motivates consumer decision-making. Anybody ever read Influence by Robert Cialdini? Bunch of you, great book. You can read it in about 2 hours, another really good model of human motivation. And then let's not forget the granddaddy of them all, the best known model of human motivation. It dates back to the 1940s. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Maslow, yes, Maslow. It's been around a long time, but you are paying attention. Okay, there's the real thing. Yeah, Maslow, just because it's trite, just because it's kind of become a cultural trope, doesn't mean it's not useful. Moving on, let's talk about ability. Ability is the second element in the model. It's the degree to which one is capable of performing a task. Ability is pretty simple. I'm going to show you how Fogg looks at ability because it's a really interesting way of looking at it, and it's a new one for me, but I'm also going to show you another way that I like for looking at ability as well. Fogg's take is that ability is a function of resources, specifically scarce resources. Whatever it is that you don't have enough of, that you need to do whatever it is you need to do. Whatever it is that's in short supply, that is your constraining factor. And that is, basically the thing that controls ability. Yes? Yes, you got, hold on. Credit where credit is due. Yeah, so this is a slide about resources, and that is a picture of racehorses. Yeah, oh, the guy, oh, that's no fair. He's from Kentucky. So anyway, so that's Fogg's take on ability. I really like it. Like I said, it was a new way of thinking about ability for me. But here's another way I also really like to think about ability, and that is the whole idea of simplification. Often the difference between people who are capable of a task and those who don't seem to be able to get it done lies in their ability to simplify. A lot of the things that we face in our daily lives are very complicated, and we make them feasible by finding a way, finding a strategy for simplifying them. And so if you can figure out how people are simplifying or why people are struggling to simplify, that often can give you a really good window into ability. So that's ability. And let's talk about triggers. Yeah, that's just a dumb joke. That's not a visual pun. There's a lot of synonyms we can use for triggers. We can call them cues, we can call them prompts, we can call them calls to action. Disruptors is a good term for them. But I like to call triggers tactics, because that's our world. Triggers are marketing tactics, and that, therefore, is where this model, where the rubber meets the road. There are three kinds of triggers that you need to think about based on where you sit with respect to motivation and ability. If you're in a situation where motivation is high and ability is low, they want to do it, but they can't seem to figure out how, then you need what's called a facilitator. And a facilitator is someone that is aimed specifically at those factors affecting ability. So often it would be at resources. A coupon is a good idea, a good example of that. It addresses a paucity of funds, extending a deadline if what's short is time. So that's facilitators. If you've got the opposite situation, they really can do it, they just don't want to, you need what's called a spark. A spark is something that addresses motivation. Anti-smoking ads are a good example of sparks. Burger King years ago had an advertising campaign that said, "Aren't you hungry?" There's a spark. Probably the best known example of a spark that I can think of is what is still Nike's advertising slogan, and that is, "Just do it." I can't think of a better example of a spark. And then finally, if, hallelujah, your situation is that motivation and ability are both high, then all you need is a signal. Something just to remind people of something that they know how to do and they want to do. A good example of that are all those emails I get from Amazon about the things that are still in my shopping cart, and perhaps I'd like to buy them. One other thing that I want to tell you is that because triggers are tactics, because they are marketing tactics, when it comes time to start thinking about triggers, talking about triggers, having work sessions, like when I'm having work sessions with my clients about triggers, and we need to talk about tactics, it's good to bring some structure, some organization to that conversation. And so there's a whole basket of tools that you can use to help you facilitate those conversations as well. Here's a good one. Everybody here has probably learned about this at some level or other of their education, the marketing mix. Neil Borden's marketing mix models, the 4 Ps. It's from the 50s, but it's a really good way of thinking about tactics. But there are other marketing mix models out there as well. Borden himself expanded his 4 Ps to 7 Ps later on in his career. Robert Lauterborn at the University of North Carolina came up with the 4 Cs, which is a consumer-centric tactics model, which is quite different from the way Borden looks at it. It's really worth it. Here's one I really like. This is the 7 Cs compass, if anybody here is familiar with that. That's a Japanese marketing mix model, very different from these others. Sometimes it might really be what you need. And then finally, anybody here ever do touchpoint mapping? A bunch of you. Touchpoint mapping is a great tool. It's a great way of organizing how you think about all the ways that a brand and a consumer interact, and how, therefore, you can structure triggers to take advantage of whatever your motivation and ability situation is. So that's a very brief introduction to the Fogg behavior model. There's a lot more to know. There are a number of articles out there. I've got them. If you'd like me to send them to you, please just get in touch. Like I said, I'm happy to give you my slides. And if you just want to talk about this, you probably can tell that I really like this stuff and I could talk about it for hours. So please reach out. I'm happy to take you through all the details, because there's a lot more detail and nuance here that, in 15 minutes you can't get to.